What it do, y'all? Good rising. Today is Thursday. Usually on Thursdays I do my live chats with Hallie, but we are taking a break from that today. And I also just wanted to share some stuff that's on my mind. I don't watch the news much. Why is that? Because it is a cesspool of negativity, right? I think, and that's the thing, something that I've been figuring out for myself. How do we remain informed while not necessarily relying on mass media to tell us the news, because they're telling a particular narrative, right? And so as I was sitting here yesterday getting ready for my creative writing class, a little pop-up came up from the news app on my Mac, which is surprising. I mean, I never really get news like that, so I was like, okay. And I read something about someone in the Capitol and storming, right? And I was like, what? So I opened it and I was like, I'm not going to read this. Like, I read a gist of it, and then I went to do my class. And then obviously took to social media later and saw that it was all over the place. So for those that don't know, and I didn't read into it, so I'm not going to read into it. And this is just, I just want to tell y'all what is on my mind. Okay? But what happened is that some Trump supporters, or folks who really align themselves with this man's ideology, decided to pull up in the Capitol and act a damn fool. From what I saw in the images, I saw people fucking breaking in, like, windows, climbing in through shit, like, and the most surprising thing to witness, not surprising that it happened, but surprising thing to, like, literally see on tape, was when the protesters were approaching, like, the barricade, and the police were stepping aside to let them in, and, like, walking with them. Like, I saw that shit, right? And it's just really, it's humorous, right? And it's also fucked up that, like, when people are protesting about Black Lives Matter, which is when somebody has been killed by law enforcement and they're looking for justice, and they're very peacefully marching in the street. I've been to a protest where I have seen police, big body standing there, arms locked, like, with the freaking clear barricade, like, no, thou shalt not pass, head ass. But then these fools coming in with guns and shit, shooting in the I don't know, man. I feel like it's not funny, but I don't understand how we cannot be humored by this. That this is what I've been talking about for a long ass time. So I'm gonna just read to you the notes I have, because it's gonna help me guide a little bit. What it do, Sprigs? So I'm not pressed about the Capitol, because I have known this country was not designed to keep me and people like me and anybody who is not 35, white, and a man safe. It was meant to keep the exact people who stormed it safe. Don't we notice that the lawmakers and the people who pulled up in there look very similar? Okay? And I think the thing that's blowing me the most is this whole, like, this is not who we are. This is not who we are. We only like this overseas. We only like this on the low in black communities and brown communities. Like, no, this is who we are. Okay, let's be honest. This is who we are, and if we could be honest about who we are, we can actually do something different. I watched this video from Mark Charles. His handle is @WirelessHogan. He's a native person who was running for the campaign. And I found his profile, and, like, I mean, I wasn't here for the campaign, because, like, I think a lot of shifts have to happen in America before we can even put somebody in power that would be able to, like, do a thing effectively for all the people. But his campaign was making we the people mean all the people, because we the people ain't never meant all the people. We the people always just meant whoever the fuck wrote that document and whoever they were talking about. Because the fact of the matter is, black people, well, they're referred to as savages in the text, the natives, and then black people and women were added into the document after you declare. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Like, we already know that all men are created equal, but slavery wasn't abolished until, like, 100 years later. What are we talking about? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really crazy. Like, this is who we are. We are a country who is built on hypocrisy. We are a country who's built on lies. Like, we are built on violence. People came from Europe to here to wipe out people. Like, they killed off mad native folks. We sit in these lands and have no clue who was here before us. We have to take time to do research to find the people who lived in these lands long before us. And we'd be like, oh, who gives a fuck? The blood is soaked in the land. The energy is here, and it's never been acknowledged, it's never been dealt with, and it's never been alleviated. We just add in shit on top of that. So this is who we are, and I think that's important that we need to say that. This is who America is. That shit that happened at the Capitol, that's who America is. America's full of fucking cowboys. That's what do we remember the Western movies and shit? Like, Manifest Destiny, people trying to conquer this way? Like, America's whole thing is a brat. Is it not? We rebelled against Europe. We came here to find freedom, or they came here to find, religious freedom from being persecuted. And then they persecuted mad people. Right? And we have like 2.3 million people in prison right now. Well, I'm just confused as to why the narrative isn't... I've been for a long time confused as to why the narrative isn't adding up. But something that Mark Charles says that really I love is we need to create a common memory. Okay? We need to get on the same freaking page about what it is that has happened here. And stop being like, oh, it's identity politics, and oh, like black people have a different kind of history. No, black history is American history. What are we talking about? All of this stuff, we share this land together. We need to have a common understanding of how this place was founded and what policies have been developed to keep the shits going. I have spent so much time talking about history and trying to breaking down, and I can share more about it, but it gets very challenging sometimes. But like, understanding where race came from. Race is a social construct. Yes, I look different than you. Yes, someone else might look different than me, but that does not mean that I am socially inferior. It does not mean that I am intrinsically inferior. It just means that I am different, right? So why is it that when we look on a large scale, that a lot of black and brown people are mistreated? Because it was created as such. And I think this is the thing that I feel like I've been trying, I just don't understand why nobody, well, all right, let me not say nobody. I don't understand why it's so hard for folks to wrap their mind around. And I do know it's because we don't sit with things enough. Like, I don't think people really think about slavery. You know what I'm saying? I don't think people really sit down to think about the fact that people were transported against their will into a space, and like many people died in that. And like, I was watching Django last night because I just felt called to like watch it amidst all of these things. And it's like, we watch movies and we see it portrayed, and like, because we see it in media, we get desensitized to it. But like, that shit was fucked up. The violence, the disgusting like smells that even existed in the space. Like, slavery was a very real thing. And something that I had, this is from my personal life. I do a lot of inner child work, and I do a lot of talking around or like healing with holding space for my child and feeling the feels and stuff like that. But it wasn't until like on New Year's Day, I had this memory of when my mom, like just one memory of my mom yelling at me. And I let myself travel back to being that small ass little kid crying. And feeling like, whoa, feeling really attacked by my mom, feeling helpless. And I don't think a lot of the time we allow ourselves to feel that, because we are very powerful beings. However, when we are able to sit and feel how powerless we are, we allow things to actually shift within us. That was the first time when I sat there with the feelings about my mom that I was like, oh, like this is why I feel bad. This is why, and like something I have inside, a core belief I've had is like, I'm a bad person. This is where it comes from. It's from childhood stuff. But I had to sit with that to be able to fully feel that and reconnect to my child in that way and reclaim her in that way. So that then now we can move forward and I can really put the rest, this whole I'm bad thing, right? So when I'm talking about this shit with what happened in the Capitol and stuff, I'm wanting to shift my focus from history to future building, right? Hi, y'all. Because I'm tired of bringing up so much energy to go to the past. As you heard, I was getting hype, right? That's bringing energy to the past, constantly solidifying the story, justifying its continued relevance, and just being like, oh yeah, well, this is why this is why this is. And I took a class in college called The Future Perfect, and when you constantly use the past to draw examples, you will keep making more of the same, right? That's how it works. I'm wanting to create entirely new spaces. I think for us to become this country that we want to be, because yes, again, this is who we are. The violence that we see, that is who we are. This is who America is. This is how it was built. Who do we want to be? I guess I should make that the title of this thing, right? This rioting in the Capitol. This is who we are. Thanks for your patience. Who do we want to be? Wow, great. So that's kind of like, that was just a preface. But now this is the more meat and the potatoes of what I'm talking about, okay? So I've been reflecting on what are the key aspects to building a new society, you know? I think I spend so much time, and I think a lot of the time when I'm thinking about things that we don't like, we tend to talk about what we don't like about it. But like, okay, so what do you want instead? What do you actually want instead? What do these things actually look like? If you can imagine it, you can conceive of it, it exists somewhere. And I think the thing that fucked me up in college, I remember when I was like, I can't imagine a world without capitalism or racism. And I was like, that's messed up, because if I can't imagine it, I'm not even allowing my creative juices to go over there to create that possibility. Like even in another timeline, I couldn't even think of that. That's messed up. So we need to use our imagination, our dreams. These are things that are important, because that's what disrupts reality. That's what disrupts what it already is. You need to bring in new things. So I've been thinking about what are the aspects of a society. I was playing SimCity on the DS, and so I came up with some, which was like school, you know, work and sustaining ourselves, food, social culture, how we relate to one another, how we hold space for each other, human capacity, health. And then the part that was interesting was like rules, laws, consequences. Criminals, what do we do with that, right? Education too, like if the whole thing, like school I think is about educating folks to, like, you know, we're trying to, I mean, right now it's an indoctrination system, but like school is supposed to be teaching people the legacy, the history, the narrative of the land, so that you can create new creators, right? New people who to lead to the leading edges. But we don't do that in school. We do a lot of shit that we just teach a bunch of wrong ass shit, first of all. And then like, we learn so many things. We just learn so many things that just don't make any sense. Like, and we don't really teach students to critically think in school. Like, yes, that's kind of what it's about, but not really, because it's really about passing grades and like belonging. But that, we could talk about that. So those are some aspects I thought about. Let me share some other thoughts. This is like kind of jumbled in. I was just writing. The cruelty of our from watching Django. The cruelty of our punishment system comes from the Middle Ages and slavery times. Like, I don't know. It's about striking fear, the fear of violence into people. It's interesting how to regulate people, this reality believes that punishment is the best way to discipline people. And again, that's having to understand where this history is coming from. If you really paid attention to the Middle Ages, that shit was scary. I remember doing a project studying tools of torture in the Middle Ages and capital punishment, and that shit was really wild. Like, and I think I really don't think we take enough time to reflect on how history compiles, right? It is a composition of all the things. Like, our world history is together. It's built upon each other, and then we're here. It's not like things happen in a vacuum. I have a question of what would it be like to teach discipline and right action, like acting in ways that serve a community and ourselves without violence and punishment, right? What do we do with what we have now? I'm thinking of the Five of Swords. Let me see. I gotta pull it up. For anybody who's familiar with tarot, the Five of Swords depicts this image of a man in the foreground, like in the front of the card, looking kind of back at these two people. He's holding three swords, and there's two on the floor, and the other two people are kind of looking away, going away. So let me show you what it looks like here. So that's the Five of Swords. Okay. The reason I bring that up in this moment and saying, like, I think we're in a Five of Swords moment, when I first saw this card, to me, I felt like this person and kind of being like, so when are they going to come, like, pick up their things, right? Like, waiting for them. And the person who was reading for me was like, the Five of Swords can also be like, that's none of your business. Those two people got to figure out what they're going to do. And then you got to do something different, because you got what you need. You have your stuff. And those two, they're not picking them up. You can't compel them to. You can't make them. That's up to you. And the beauty of it is that that's none of your business, right? So obviously it is our business what is happening in the Capitol. But that also has none of my business. That is none of my business, because I don't see none of me in there. I don't see nobody who look like me in there. And it's not like, oh, so I'm safe. It's just I'm saying that this conversation that's happening between white supremacist groups, like the white supremacist government and the white supremacist group that is stomping in because the person who's currently in charge is not as white supremacist as they want, that has nothing to do with me in terms of my livelihood. What I want to do is, okay, they doing a thing that clearly should not be how government runs. This is not how politics should go. This is not what social culture should look like. This is, what the fuck are we doing? There's kids still in cages. There's people not even having food. It's cold. It's winter. And we over here with this shit. Like, so where can we actually direct our attention? What is it actually that we're trying to do? What are we trying to have replace this stuff? So the question I'm asking is, what are the guiding principles of your ideal society? Values, aspects, right? Because aspects can be concrete things, because I don't have all the answers. And I'm not sitting here like, oh, come to me with all the answers. My whole thing is that I actually want to create spaces that we can talk about what our ideal society looks like. Because we can't keep the energy of the problem and the energy of the solution are two different things. And here's an example. So I'm currently not smoking. I'm not smoking cannabis for this year, for the year of 2021. I'm learning to engage with it in different ways and appreciate the plant medicine for what it is, right? So in not smoking, the first couple days was really freaking hard because I've smoked for like 6 years straight, right? So like I can sit and gripe and complain about how hard it was, which I did, and I was upset, and I was just like, I just want to smoke, oh. Or I can make a list of new things to do. Right? I can sit here and complain about, oh, I'm not smoking, and what do I do, and this is so whack, and I don't know, and I've depended on this for so long, and I can talk about all the reasons why I smoke. I can talk about what I'm getting from it. I can talk about all these things. But the point is, I made a commitment that I'm not doing it, so what is this actually doing for me? Nothing. It's cool to unpack. It's cool to understand my motivations behind the thing. It's cool to understand what I'm going to there for. But once I identify that I'm smoking because I'm bored, then now it's time to do different things. So what am I actually going to do with my time then if I'm not doing that? Because the energy of the solution is different than the energy of the problem. So what are the guiding principles of your ideal society? For me, I have grace first, restorative justice, social emotional learning, centering capacity, honoring individuality, treating others how they want to be treated, and collaboration, as well as truth. Those are just some things that came to my mind last night when I was reflecting. And truth varies and spans, right? But the issue in America is that they just straight up lie, and they teach children lies, right? The fact that children learn about Christopher Columbus in school is some bullshit because he was a murderer and a rapist and a pedophile and foolish. He called them Indians, and we still to this day, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm saying. There's so much that we need to stop and address and acknowledge and deal with before we can move forward, right? And I think we've been in this space where people are calling attention to things, and there's obviously people who still want to hold on to the reality that they're a part of, and we can't force people to change, right? We can't. However, I'm just going to bring up... There's information out there, bro. You just gotta read history, and also it's just like history is just a perspective, right? It's understanding whose story and whose perspective are you hearing. His story, right? Not her story, not their story, not our story, not my story. His story. And I can be real funny with the words like, oh, well, yeah, but also men have been in power. White men have been in power, so history. And like, look at history, look at the people who have been in power, and you can determine who has determined the history. Who has been left out, you can tell that. The fact that Black History Month is relegated to 1 month when it is literally the reason that America exists is through Black labor and native labor and native blood and Black blood. And Irish people's blood, like a lot of blood has gotten into this place, but we don't really talk about that. We just talk about the people in power who have like constructed things, right? So, point is, questions are really important to me. And questioning why do we feel that this government is so valid? Like, do you not see them like, that's what I literally laugh. I'm like, this is embarrassing. This is a joke. And yet, still holding them in such high esteem because they have the threat of violence against us. That sounds like coercion. We got to stop trying to fit into places that don't fit us, that were never created with us in mind in any position of power. We were meant to be the engine of the car, not the outside. We were meant to drive the car forward, and if the engine breaks, toss that sucker out and put a new one in. That's what it is. We live in a place of, we don't appreciate shit. Use, misuse, and abuse. That's what we do to this world. That's what humans have done through like, when you think about the Industrial Revolution, it could have been done in a way where we're growing with society, with nature, right? If I think about native folks were plenty successful. They were doing their things, right? They were living in nature, achieving great spiritual heights, achieving great community, right? But we don't consider them mighty because they don't have a written history. So nobody consolidated all their shit into one line. And because they don't have the same technology as Western folks did. But like, they were living in harmony with things. And that's why they were able to sustain themselves. Versus now, like, people really, we're struggling. We're struggling in this world because we have used, misused, and abused all our resources. And really, this comes down to, like, so much has to shift. We've given away a lot of our freaking power. We have given, like, there's something that my dad said that has stuck with me for the whole year. He said it last year, was like, he's like, I think we let a lot of shit slide in the 80s. I think that's kind of why we're here now. Yeah. We have given away so much of our power. Here's some examples of some shit that just came to me last night. Grocery stores. How many of you can grow your own food? How many of you have the space to grow your own food? How many of you have a community garden that you can go to get food? If the grocery stores collapsed, you would be starving. We are so dependent on other people to sustain us. That's crazy. Okay, that's just one example. Schools. Something that I noticed, like, parents this year, especially I was noticing my mom, what she learned this year is what her children are learning in school. Most parents don't know what the fuck is going on in school. And you can tell that when you ask, especially immigrant parents, for support with homework, and they're like, what is this? Because you're letting random ass people educate your kids because we have to do work. We got other shit to do. I gotta go hustle bustle over there. So I'm gonna just leave you over here. And I think it was Malcolm X who was like, if you allow your child to be educated by the enemy, like, you're a fool. It's because we want to believe that this society has our best interest in mind, that it cares about us and it wants us to prosper. That's why you're like, oh yeah, like, you could just go. It's like if you have a babysitter and you just expect, it's like Vicky and Fairly Odd Parents. Her job is a babysitter. She's supposed to care for kids. She's supposed to be kind. She's supposed to be loving, all of that shit. But she was not. She was wicked. And we knew that. And Timmy knew that. But his parents didn't know that. And that's what I feel about school. School doing some fuck shit to people, to our sense of belonging, teaching us straight up lies, teaching us to conform, teaching us perfectionism, and also teaching mad hard topics. And if sometimes, I don't even know. Like, my brother is learning vocabulary words but struggles with reading, and he's in, like, 4th grade. I'm like, but why does he need to know affect means, like to pretend? But he doesn't know how to he doesn't know how to regulate his emotions. You get what I'm saying? Like, okay, so school. And if you don't go to school, you can't get a job. Or that's the idea, that's the narrative that they tell us to kind of keep us in it. But also, like, it's not always that what you're learning in school translates into your real life and into your job. Okay, so grocery stores is one way we've given away our power. Schools. Another one I have is church. Okay, church is for most people what rules their spiritual connection. Most people, when they hear spirituality, if you're not, like, they're not the same, right? Organized religion and spirituality are not the same thing. But I know for me, I would have had no connection to God if it were not through the church. That's how I learned about it growing up. And, like, God is obviously something that we are familiar with, right? God bless America. It's on our money, right? However, the institution of church has taught us so many horrible things. And teaches us a lot about fear and morality. And also want to remind us that a big part of how the black race and how people started conquering more black people and how the black race thing got solidified was through Christianity, who was saying it's actually a good thing. You are a good Christian for taming these wild ass African people. Okay? And the Crusades. Let's just remember that church is a violent institution. Okay? Let's remember that, because it is. And remember also that they are gatekeepers of knowledge. Right? If you think about the amount of people that were burned at the stake, scientists and, like, thinking minds that were burned at the stake for speaking against what God decreed. How can I speak against what God decreed if I found this? Isn't that God who inspired me to do that too? So only what you say, though. You know what I'm saying? We have given away our power to death, our fear of death. We're terrified of death, and that's why we allow so many things to happen too, I think. Because if we were cool with death, we would understand that death is just an alchemic process where we're transitioning. You go somewhere else and it's different. But we're terrified of death. So we allow people to say that they're going to protect us. We play small. We don't do certain things because we don't want to put ourselves in the line of death. I'm not saying we need to go die, right? Hold up. I'm just saying this fear of death has driven anxiety, has created such anxiety in this world. So we're so scared of dying, we're willing to pay for these like anti-aging creams and all these anti-aging programs, and like we're so like frantically worried about what's like the end of our life that we're not even necessarily making the best of it now for some folks. And some people have the opposite effect, right? They know that they're going to die, so they live a fuller life, but that's not the case for a lot of people. I have media and social media too. We've given where do you get your news if it's not from the news? Like, how do we actually have an informed society? And the reason I'm thinking about this, and again, the guiding question, I'm going to type it in the thing, and I hope you all do respond, and I would love to, you can feel free to respond now. What are your guiding principles and guiding aspects of your ideal society? Because, like, someone asked me, so what would the criminal justice system look like? Or what would social justice or justice look like in your world? And I was like, that is a good question. What would media look like in your world? I was like, that is a good question too. Because again, I have all these complaints about these things that I don't like, but do I know what I want them to look like? Some of them. I'll tell you about the justice one in a moment. Medicine is something else we've given away our power. First of all, the body heals itself, right? Because a doctor, if they cut you, they're not there freaking in your cells like generating. No, your body is healing itself. And we're not taught to help facilitate that process. Like, for instance, the way that the body heals itself is through rest, like nourishing yourself through good food and like good energy, right? But we ain't got time for that. Bro, you got to be at work tomorrow at 7. So like, sorry. No, your body's not going to be able to heal itself in the way that it needs to. So we're going to accelerate that process, or we're going to give you some chemicals so that you can accelerate that process. Thinking about painkillers, like they literally give you toxins to manage your pain. You get what I'm saying? Like, we've given away, and I bring up native folks before and other traditions because people and indigenous people, because they were living in tune. They had their power in terms of they had their food. They had the ways that they were educating people. And I'm sure there were issues in their societies. I'm not saying they were perfect. However, I feel like there was a lot of agency that we do not have. And I think it's really fucked up because we're the land of the free and home of the brave and all this choice. And like America, the land of opportunity and all this shit, but we have no power. And there's so many things we don't even know about our own, like we don't have a common knowledge of even the place that we're in. The fact that like there are genuinely white people, when you talk about Black history or like their history too, and the history of slavery, oh, it's so long ago, like what are you talking about? Like Holocaust deniers, people who really be denying this shit happened. Like, so how are we supposed to live in community? We need to have the same memory, not the same exact memory, but we need to understand what happened without cutting shit out. Like, we need to understand. You know what I'm saying? Oh, man. Something I was thinking about, too, is what does it look like to draw boundaries with our country? With a country. I never thought about that. I had spoken about that last week with Hallie, like drawing boundaries with institutions. What does it look like to draw a boundary with work? That's something you wouldn't even think about. Like, what? Draw boundaries with work? Like, it's a faceless object or a faceless entity. How do you draw boundaries with it? And that's the thing that I think is really important. How do we draw boundaries with something like this, with this country? How do we be like, no? Like, no! This is unacceptable to me. We deserve better. I deserve better. You deserve better. And when are we actually going to be able to do that? How can we move forward with wholeness? I mean, the things that come up for me is like the three things I'm going to leave, I said three things, but I don't know. The things I'm going to leave you with to ponder, and I would really like to hear your responses. And I'm going to figure out more spaces to cultivate conversation and dialogue, because obviously this is not the space. I'm just talking, sharing my feels and thoughts. But I do want to have spaces to actually come together, generate energy around what are your guiding aspects for your ideal society, or what are the guiding aspects for your ideal society? What are the guiding principles of your ideal society? So aspects meaning like school, community centers, law enforcement, whatever yours is. What are the guiding principles? And what does it look like to draw boundaries with our country? Like, when is enough enough? Like, I feel kind of tearful a little bit because I'm just so, when I first started reading about how fucked up America was. So I learned this in like in college, right? Well, when I first learned about race being constructed, and then learned about how it was constructed, and learned about how it was how it was spread and enforced in policy, and reading, like, looking at the Constitution with the words in there talking about 3/5 of a person, talking about, like, you know, everybody but black people or women, like, when I was like, but when are people really going to be like this? Not like, oh, that's in the past. It's whatever. It's in the past. No, but like, when are we going to be like, that does not work? We need to acknowledge it. We need to deal with the consequences. We are still dealing with the consequences quietly. Someone said something, last thing I thought of, which is, so how can we have a balanced government when we're split so drastically between the left and the right? There's no balance. So, shit gotta change. Shit is changing. I'm just curious as to where you are on the side of change. Are we still complaining and upset about the things that are happening? Are we educating ourselves? Are we creating new possibilities? Because for things to change, things have to change. Nothing changes until something changes. And we cannot shift into something new without identifying what those new things. We can, right? We can shift and it'll be nameless. But like, we saw what happened when people just shifted without acknowledging. We have this mess of a country built on the foundation of we're all equal, but not these people. And, oh, but we'll add them in though. We need to cut that shit out. Take a moment to full pause, full stop, acknowledge, deal with what is going on, and create what the fuck it is that we want. So, I'm irritated, slightly. I'm just also really passionate. Yeah, so if you want to talk more about this, let me know. I'm still figuring out, what are the best ways to even do this, but for now, this is what I got. And that's it. Have a great day, y'all. And what does it look like to draw boundaries with our country? That's a big one for me.